So today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, tools. Specifically, how do I decide how much money I'm going to spend on certain tools? Stick around. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So this week I picked up a Jet metalworking bandsaw, and when I was putting it together this morning, I got to thinking maybe we'll talk a little bit about different tools and how I decide what I'm going to buy, what I think is a good deal, how much to spend on particular tools. It's not really something we've talked about. I mean, you've seen, if you've been watching the channel, I've got a tremendous amount of tools, all kinds of different stuff, woodworking, metalworking, you name it. So I've bought a lot of tools over my lifetime, and I know if you're like me, which I think a lot of my audience is, if you gave me unlimited money, I'd find tools to buy. But unfortunately, if you're like me, you don't have unlimited money. So I always try to get the best bang for my buck and decide what I should spend money on, what I should maybe skimp a little bit on. And that's kind of what I wanted to explain today. Talk a little bit about it. You guys give me some feedback if you kind of think along the same thought process or if you have a different take on it. But basically, I kind of break things down into how much am I going to use it? Do I really need it or do I just want it? So, I mean, to start with, you know me. I primarily do woodworking, sawmill, lumber type stuff. That is always my priority. And what I've found over the years, I don't skimp on that stuff. I always try to buy the best piece of equipment for me, for whatever job I'm trying to accomplish. You know, whether it be a Wood-Mizer sawmill or Baker Edger or Northfield planer, that kind of stuff, that's how I make my living. That's my bread and butter. I'm not skimping on that. And I found through going through different tools over the years, different planers, don't get me wrong, you may have to start with something that's less than what you want because obviously, you know, money's an issue for everybody. If you're just starting out in business or you're just starting out in woodworking as a hobby, sometimes you can't swing what you absolutely want. But I'm here to tell you, if you think you want something, you might be better off saving money and just buying what you really want up front rather than stepping up through stuff, because a lot of times that just costs time and money, and that's a whole different story. But basically what I've found is the stuff that I'm making money off of that's part of my business, I find it's better just to buy once, cry once, as they say, spend the money, buy the best tool that'll suit me for the job I'm trying to accomplish. And that's basically almost always how I look at woodworking equipment. But, you know, for me, that's my business. That's how I'm making money. So, you know, I found over the years I've worked with enough lower grade equipment to know that I will spend the money and I will be much happier working with a top-notch piece of equipment. So for me, like I said, a couple brands, you know, Wood-Mizer, Baker, and this is no endorsement to anything. I'm going to probably rattle off a lot of different equipment, a lot of different tools, and I'm not sponsored, I'm not endorsed, I'm not getting paid by anybody. So I'm just giving you my personal experience with different brands, and we'll talk about all kinds of different stuff. I'm probably gonna, as we get into this, maybe aggravate some people, make some people mad, but this is just my opinion. So your mileage may vary, but when it comes to my business, that's my number one focus. I will buy the best I can find, you know, whether it be a Nile kiln. For me, they work great, have 3 of them. You know, it's just, those are brands that work for me, that have worked for me. They're not the cheapest thing on the market, but they do the job I'm looking to do, and they give me a return on my money. So that is the easiest thing for me. Now, the problem is, in this business, there's all the other stuff. There's all my maintenance items, there's all my hand tools, metalworking stuff. I have a lot of things I do that don't directly put money in the bank. You know, it's not directly making a wood product, but I need the stuff. You know, whether it be all my hand tools for working on equipment, keeping the equipment running. I mean, in some ways it's just as important, but I'm not running this stuff 7 days a week, you know, 40 hours a week, whatever the case may be. And then there's stuff that's kind of a luxury for me. This bandsaw, honestly, it kind of falls into that camp. If you've been following along, you know I've been doing a lot of metal fab projects here lately. I've been working on the Kenworth truck, and I've been working on some stuff for the farm here, different projects. Some I'm showing you, some I'm just kind of doing on the side. But I've been doing a lot of metal working the last 2 weeks, really. And when I started in, I kind of thought to myself, I've been using that DeWalt chop saw there for many, many years. It's been great. It does a decent job, but it's not the most accurate. It makes a mess, but it gets the job done. And when I got into all these metalworking projects, I was doing a lot of cutting, and I kind of thought, boy, you know, it'd be nice to have a bandsaw. They're a little bit cleaner, a little bit more accurate. I didn't know a whole lot about them, so I started researching. You know how that goes. You go down the rabbit hole, you start looking. Well, I could have went to Harbor Freight and I could have got one for probably $300. And then I was looking, and it's like, well, there was probably a time in my career where that maybe would have been the decision, because, well, that's what I could afford, and it may or may not have worked out for me. It probably would have worked for a while. But as I get older, I'm looking at a more longer term horizon with a lot of this stuff. And I thought, well, what's the next tier up over Harbor Freight? And to make a long story short, I looked at a lot of different models, and I ended up with this Jet, which is made in Taiwan, but it's similar in quality to like a Grizzly, if you're familiar with Grizzly woodworking and metalworking equipment. It's a decent brand name. It's been around for a long time. It had all the features I wanted, and the price was right. So I spent a little over twice what the Harbor Freight was, and hopefully in the long term this pays off to be a good investment. You know, it's I used it a little bit today. I'm pretty impressed with it. I'm pretty happy. I think it's going to work well for me. But this isn't something that necessarily makes me money. When I use it, it saves me a lot of headache, and it makes my life easier and allows me to fabricate more accurate stuff. But if I'm being honest, this is going to get used on a couple projects a year. So it's going to spend 90% of its time just sitting here. So I couldn't afford to buy a $2,000 up super premium bandsaw. Just wouldn't make sense. You know, and that's kind of how I look at things, and I think most of you probably look at it the same way. How much am I going to use it? Is it one of these things where I'm going to use it one time and I'll never use it again? Well, then I'm going to go to Harbor Freight and just buy the cheapest thing I can get. Is it something that's expensive enough that I want to have it when I need it? I want to be able to use it. I don't want to have to fight with it, but I'm not going to use it every day. But it is a longer term investment. That's kind of where this falls. I'm going to fall middle of the road. That's what I did here. There's just certain things, and everybody's different with what you're doing. There's certain things I put an emphasis on. I mean, if you've been watching, you know I'm a big Milwaukee guy. I've got all kinds of Milwaukee stuff. I use my cordless power tools just about every day in one form or another. And quite honestly, I would not buy a cheap off-brand cordless power tool. For me, you know, the batteries and the whole system are so expensive. I just buy the best, or what I think is the best. You know, I know some guys are DeWalt guys, whatever. For me personally, I think the Milwaukee is the best. So I've invested into the Milwaukee system, and I'm extremely happy with it. I think it's high quality, and for me, they've stood up to the test of time, and I beat my Milwaukee stuff. I mean, it literally gets used every day, either a drill or a grinder or a saw. There's not many days go by around here that I'm not picking up a Milwaukee tool. So I'm extremely happy with that. That is, to me, money well spent, and I really like that stuff. So that to me is a trade-off. Yes, I could have bought cheaper stuff, but it probably wouldn't last. And then I ended up buying 2 or 3 of them, and you're back to square one. So, sometimes you just buy the best, the name brand. But then I'll show you an example of something that is probably going to fire some people up, or maybe you cut a corner or two. So this is something I've never talked about on this channel, never showed you. I am a huge fan of Icon tools. Now, some of you might know what these are. Some of you might already be getting angry at your screen, saying that I buy cheap Chinese junk, Taiwanese junk, whatever the case may be. If that's the case, you're a Snap-on guy. I can pretty much peg that's what you're into. If for those of you that don't know, Icon tools are sold at Harbor Freight. They came out a couple years ago, and I mean, let's be honest about it. They are Snap-on clones. If I had a Snap-on ratcheting wrench here, I could set it next to it and it would look exactly the same, and you really couldn't tell the difference. And I've seen people compare them side by side on YouTube, and honestly, I know the Snap-on guys will never admit this. They do all kinds of tests and they perform the same. Now, don't get me wrong. If I had all the money in the world, I would have $20,000, $30,000 of Snap-on tools and toolboxes here. And if I didn't have all the money in the world and I was a full-time mechanic, I would probably still have it here, because I do think there's some merit to having, a brand like Snap-on backing your tools. But for me, I use these a fair amount. Particularly these wrenches get used pretty hard on a weekly basis, but not on a daily basis. And they have stood up for about 3 years now, and I've never had a problem with them. You can see I have the screwdrivers, also clones of Snap-on. I've put this side by side with the Snap-on screwdriver. They're identical. I've got a bunch of other stuff too, gear pullers, breaker bar. I've really fallen in love with this Icon stuff, and I'll tell you why. It's less than half the price of the comparable Snap-on. You can literally take this wrench set it next to a Snap-on wrench set, less than half. Same way with the wrenches, all of it. So to me, this is almost a hack. This is kind of the best of both worlds. You get the really high-end stuff and you're not paying the price for it. Now, I know everybody's going to say, well, Snap-on's made in the USA. This is made in Taiwan or China. I'm totally honest, not even sure. Not made in the USA. My response to that is, yes, I know. In a perfect world, we would all like to buy American-made goods. Look around your house. It's just not the world we live in. And for that matter, not all Snap-on stuff is made in the USA, just as a disclaimer. If you really look behind the scenes, some of their stuff is made overseas. So it's just not a realistic thing. I'm sorry. If you're a big made in the USA person, if you give me two products that are identical, one's made in the USA, one's not, I'll buy the made in the USA. But I'm a free market kind of guy. I fully believe that, we should compete. And if a business can produce the same quality product for less money, that's who's going to win my business. I wouldn't expect somebody to buy my product and spend more money for an inferior product or the same product if they can get it cheaper somewhere else. I mean, that's just the way it works. For that matter, all this Milwaukee stuff, that's not made in the USA. A lot of people are fooled by these brands. They think it is, but if you're only going to buy American-made tools, I hate to tell you, you're not going to have very many tools, especially woodworking stuff, because there's no American-made woodworking equipment other than the extremely expensive stuff like Northfield. You're not going to find it. Grizzly, Jet, Powermatic, DeWalt, the stuff's all made overseas. So I know people get on a soapbox about it. Is it the way I wish it was? I wish everything was made in the USA, but it's not reality. So I put that aside when I'm making buying decisions. I look based on customer reviews. That's what the internet's great for. You can pretty much figure out if a product's a lemon or if it's good or what to expect from it before you ever buy it, which is extremely helpful with making these kinds of decisions. But for me, this is a win-win. If you've never heard of it, I highly suggest looking up Icon. And I have mixed feelings about Harbor Freight, to be perfectly honest with you. Some of their stuff is complete junk. There's no doubt about it. It's disposable. It's just garbage. But this particular line of tools they came out with is excellent. I also like their toolboxes. These are US General toolboxes from Harbor Freight. Is it as good as a Snap-on toolbox? Probably not. If I was in and out of it all day, every day, would it hold up? Nah, I don't know. But they work pretty darn good for me. I'm happy with them. Price is right. So that's just the kind of thing, you know, you have to balance out. And as far as the made in the USA, that Wood-Mizer molder I bought last year, that MP360, that's made in Poland. So, you know, everybody's making stuff overseas. It's just the way it is. But that's my rant for that. I'm off of that topic. You know, because I know somebody's probably gonna, you know, come at me with, especially the Snap-on guys. I know the Snap-on guys that's like a cult following. Don't get me wrong, it's great stuff. I wish I had it, but for me, it doesn't make sense. So this is kind of just something I've kind of developed over years. You know, like I said, when I was starting out, you know, I didn't have any money. I'm not going to say I have a lot of money now, but you know, business is doing well enough that I can make these decisions and plan for purchases in the business, and you know, I can afford to work with a little bit more quality stuff. Well, over here's another good example. You know, the welder's a Hobart, so I'd say that's middle of the road. It's not a Miller, although Miller owns them, so there's a lot of Miller parts in here. And it served me very well over, I've had this, I don't know, 6 or 8 years maybe. Done a lot of projects. It's not cheap, it's not the most expensive, but it balances out. I'm not a full-time welder. Wouldn't want to be one, to be quite honest with you. So this fits my niche. I do have a Miller plasma cutter. Spent a little bit more money for that because I thought it was warranted. I thought it was worthwhile. I'd get more features and it would hold up better, and it has. It's been a great machine. One thing I will say, safety-wise, I don't like to skimp on that. So I've had some cheaper welding helmets over the years. A couple years ago, I finally bit the bullet, spent a good chunk of change, got a nice Miller auto darkening welding helmet. It's another thing, when you're young and dumb, you don't really think about it, but as you get older, you start to realize, my eyes are probably pretty important, you know. So I don't skimp on safety type stuff, you know, respirators, earmuffs, things like that. In the grand scheme of things, they're not that much money, so it's just cheap insurance. So overall, I just wanted to make a little video here, show you kind of how I make these decisions. I'm not a brand snob. Honestly, I'll work with anything. I mean, besides those wrenches that are my go-to, I've got a ton of just random cheap wrenches in there. But I have found out over the years, you know, buying better stuff does make jobs go a little bit easier. But it all comes down to, you know, is it going to make money for you, or how does it fit in your budget? Because, hey, we all have unlimited wants, and, well, we all have limited budgets. Well, I think we all have limited budgets. If you don't have a limited budget, help me out. Send me a few bucks. I'll buy some tools for you. But anyway, I don't know. That's about what I got on this. If you guys have any questions for me, or if you have any comments on how you select tools, let me know, because I'm curious. If I'm the only one that thinks like this, I don't think so. I think most people go through this thought process and they weigh out their options and decide, is this a Harbor Freight purchase, or is this, you know, something a little bit more upscale? Like I said, not to hate on Harbor Freight, because I got thousands of bucks worth of their stuff too. So it all falls in the tiers of cost benefit analysis, I guess is the technical term of how you weigh this stuff out. So I'll be done rambling on it. I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.